for the awkwardness. I drank more than I should have. Not enough to black out, but enough to feel bold. Sloppy, bold. It was close to 2 a.m. when I left the bar. The streets were nearly empty, just the occasional car humming by. The kind of night where the world feels quieter than it should, like it's holding its breath. I remember walking to my car with my keys clenched in my fist, scanning the shadows, even though I told myself there was nothing to be afraid of. Once I started driving, I felt a little more grounded. The city lights faded behind me, and I headed toward the suburbs where I lived, about 30 minutes out. 10 minutes in, that all too familiar pressure started building in my lower abdomen. At first, I figured I could hold it. I always do. I'm not the type to stop at random gas stations. But 5 minutes later, it was unbearable. I was squirming in my seat, my eyes flicking between the road and the clock, silently begging the minutes to move faster. That's when I remembered the shortcut. My buddy Eric mentioned it a few weeks back. Cuts through the old service road near Black Hollow. Saves like 10 minutes. Still being developed, but it's passable. Just bumpy as hell. He'd told me about it after I bitched once about how long it takes to get home from downtown. Especially late at night, when all you want is your bed and not another damn red light. I never had a reason to use it before, but now, with every jolt of the car sending a shockwave through my bladder, it sounded like a lifeline. I pulled over and looked it up on my phone. My fingers were trembling, not just from urgency, but full-on desperation. I had to keep shifting my legs, bouncing my knees, squeezing every damn muscle below my belt just to hold it in. I was half dancing in the driver's seat like a 5-year-old who had to go. Every second felt like a punch to the gut, and trying to tap through maps on that tiny screen felt like a nightmare. When the shortcut finally popped up, a sketchy, narrow road snaking through what looked like thick woods, I didn't care. I was already turning the wheel before I finished looking. I just wanted to get home, fast. I took the turn. The change was immediate. The pavement gave way to gravel, then to dirt. My headlights barely cut through the thick tree cover overhead. The road dipped and swayed, every bump making my bladder scream louder. No houses, no signs, just forest. After maybe 5 minutes of bone-rattling driving, I couldn't take it anymore. I stopped the car in the middle of the road, hazards on, and stumbled out into the night. It was silent. Not the peaceful kind of silent, the kind that makes your ears ring, like the whole world had gone still to watch. I walked maybe 10 feet into the brush, just enough to not be visible from the road. That's when I saw it, a weathered wooden sign, leaning crookedly against a tree, faded red letters, chipped and cracked, but still readable. "Do not pee here." I actually laughed. "Yeah, okay," I muttered, unzipping. Relief, sweet, goddamn blissful relief. The tension in my body finally uncoiled. My muscles relaxed, my eyes fluttered shut for a second. I swear, for a few moments, it felt like the best feeling in the world, like I was melting, floating, but just as the warmth spread through me, something else started to creep in. A shift in the air, the kind you don't notice until it's already there. A wrongness. I blinked and looked around. The woods had grown still, too still. No breeze, no bugs, no rustle of branches, just me, just the sound of liquid hitting dry leaves. And even that started to feel intrusive. That's when I felt it, a presence, like something had stepped into the clearing, but didn't want to be seen yet. My ears strained, my breath caught in my throat. Then I heard it, a low, rhythmic breathing. I froze midstream. My head turned slowly toward the sound. My eyes tried to adjust, but the trees swallowed the light. And then, movement. Something tall, too tall, a silhouette in the bushes, covered in hair or fur. I couldn't tell, but the skin underneath, it was pale, sickly, and it was naked. I don't know how I knew. It wasn't like I saw everything clearly, but there was no shine of fabric, no shape of clothing, just that raw, clammy skin catching the edge of the moonlight like it had never been covered. Something about the way it moved, too, completely unself-conscious, like an animal, like something that didn't care who saw it. It wasn't hiding. It was just there, exposed, watching. It was breathing hard, not angry, not animalistic, just steady, in and out, in and out. But there was something off about it, something too deliberate. It sounded almost human, like the labored breath of an old man with lungs full of smoke, every inhale hitching, scraping across dry leaves, deep, slow, wheezing, like it had been standing there forever, waiting. It wasn't just breathing, it was tasting the air, measuring me. I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over my own pants. My hands fumbled at the zipper, yanking it up fast and jerky. I didn't care if a few drops soaked into my jeans. I just needed to be covered. Every horror movie I'd ever seen ran through my mind in flashes. I kept thinking, if I fall now, if I don't move, that thing's going to drag me into the woods, and no one's ever going to find me. I didn't finish. I didn't care. I sprinted back to the car, slammed the door shut, and peeled out so fast I almost slid into a ditch. I didn't look back. As soon as the trees started to thin and the forest gave way to open road again, I felt this wave of shaky relief wash over me. If that dirt path had gone on any longer, I'm convinced I would have flipped the damn car, the way I was tearing through those uneven stretches. Sharp dips, jagged rocks, loose gravel. It's a miracle the wheels didn't lift off the ground. I didn't slow down, couldn't. Every second spent there felt like 1 second closer to never leaving at all. My hands were trembling on the wheel, knuckles bone white. I drove like a maniac, swerving through empty lanes, barely slowing at red lights, nearly sideswiping a parked car on a turn. At one point, I blew past a crosswalk and didn't even realize there were people there until I caught a blur of motion in my rear view. I didn't care. I just needed to get home, somewhere with walls, locks, light. When I finally pulled into my driveway, I sat there for a full minute, engine running, too afraid to step out. My palms were slick with sweat. My heart still hadn't slowed down. Inside, I locked every door and double-checked the windows. I turned on every damn light in the apartment, even the ones I never used. Then I went straight to the shower, not because I felt dirty, but because I needed to feel anything else on my skin. I scrubbed until it hurt. That night I didn't sleep. I tried, I really did, but every time I shut my eyes, I could hear it again. That breathing, that slow, deliberate drag of air through something ancient. I laid there under the covers with my eyes wide open until the sun came up. Every creak in the walls felt like footsteps. Every gust of wind outside my window felt like it was waiting. Luckily, it was the weekend. I had Saturday and Sunday off. I told myself I'd sleep it off, clear my head, try to laugh about it in a few days. But Saturday morning hit different. I didn't feel hungover, not in the traditional sense, just off, like I had a weight sitting in my gut. I chalked it up to nerves, or maybe the leftover adrenaline from the night before. Maybe all that cheap whiskey was just fighting its way out of my system. I mean, I had downed more than a few drinks, right? So, yeah, of course, I'd be running to the bathroom. My body was flushing it out. At least, that's what I told myself. I stayed home all day, didn't leave the couch, barely ate. I kept going to the bathroom every hour, telling myself it was just the drinks from last night working their way out. But it wasn't. By evening, I started to notice something weird. I had just peed, like just maybe 5 minutes earlier, but already I felt that same creeping pressure again. At first I ignored it. Maybe I was just paranoid. My body was shaken up, but the hours wore on, and it only got worse. The urge became constant. It didn't matter how much I drank or didn't drink. Every 5 minutes, then every 3. It was like a faucet inside me had broken, and the worst part, even after I went, the sensation didn't go away. Then the color changed, a rusty tint at first, then deep red. That night, Saturday night, I didn't sleep either, not a wink. I was in and out of the bathroom so many times I lost count. I tried lying still, tried reading, tried distracting myself with TV, but it was like my bladder had become possessed. I was too tired to be scared, and yet too unsettled to relax. By the time the sun rose on Sunday, I was hollowed out. I sat on the edge of my bed, shaking, drained, trying to piece together what was happening. It wasn't dehydration. It wasn't just stress. Something was wrong. Deep wrong. I finally said screw it and threw on the first clothes I could find. I rushed out the door and drove straight to urgent care. They ran tests, blood work, ultrasounds, nothing conclusive. Your kidneys look fine, the doctor said, scrolling through his tablet. No sign of infection, no stones. Creatinine levels are solid. I sat on the edge of the paper-covered exam table, hunched over. But I'm peeing like every 3 minutes. I can't sleep. I can't eat. It doesn't stop. He looked at me like I was missing something obvious. Any new meds? Diuretics? Caffeine overload? Dehydration's a possibility if you've been drinking. No, I interrupted. I've been drinking water non-stop. I haven't had coffee in 2 days. I just keep going, and the pressure never leaves. He sighed and rubbed his temples. Well, your urinalysis is clean. No sugar spikes, so we can probably rule out diabetes. No UTI. We could try a bladder scan to check residual volume. But honestly, this sounds behavioral, maybe stress-related, psychogenic even. I just stared at him. What you're describing doesn't have a textbook cause, he added. If it persists, I'd recommend a urologist and maybe some anxiety screening, but medically, you're fine. I'm not fine, I said, my voice low and cracking. Something's wrong. I know my body. This isn't stress. He offered a tight, practiced smile, the kind doctors use when they're trying to end a conversation. We'll send the full report to your primary. If anything changes, call us. I left with a printout that said everything was normal, and a gnawing sense in my gut that nothing was. By day 3, things had changed again. It started subtle, a weird warmth in my lower body, like a faint sting that wouldn't quite go away. I remember standing in front of the bathroom mirror, trying to convince myself it was all in my head, but it wasn't. Not to mention I took a few days off from work, just to see matters get worse. The itching came next. First a few patches of irritation, then clusters of angry red splotches along my groin. By that afternoon, they had spread up my waist. And it wasn't just red spots. Some of them were blistered, weeping, painful to the touch. I tried every cream I had. Aloe, hydrocortisone, antifungal. Nothing helped. It felt like whatever was happening inside me was now clawing its way to the surface. And the worst part, I couldn't stop scratching. Every second I wasn't in the shower felt like torture. Sleep out of the question. I kept hoping I'd wake up and it would all be gone. That maybe my body was just detoxing from something weird. But deep down, I knew better. Something had followed me out of those woods, and it wasn't done with me. My apartment started to change in ways I couldn't explain. At first, it was just a strange dampness in the air, like someone had left the windows open during a storm, but they hadn't. Then came the smell, faint at first, almost ignorable, but over time, it thickened into something musty and wet, like freshly turned soil, like the forest had followed me home. I scrubbed the floors, took out the trash twice a day, bleached the sink. Nothing made it go away. And then came the noises. It wasn't loud, just soft, deliberate sounds. A floorboard creaking when I wasn't walking. The subtle brush of something across the carpet. The quiet exhale of air from a place that shouldn't breathe. rustling, breathing, always when I was alone, always just out of sight. One night, I had the first dream. I say dream, but it felt more like being pulled into a memory I hadn't lived yet. I was back in the woods, but it wasn't a rewind. It was something new. I wasn't standing this time. I was on my knees. The earth beneath me was cold, damp, and breathing with its own pulse. I couldn't move, couldn't even scream. And then I felt it, that breath behind me, hot, rhythmic, the same as before. Only this time, it was closer, no longer watching from the dark. It was near, breathing, slow, watching. I woke up soaked in sweat. That morning, the rash had spread to my thighs. I tried everything, doctors, dermatologists, hydration therapy. Nothing worked, and worse, the dreams kept coming, more vivid, more demanding. One night, in sheer desperation, I told Eric everything. I didn't even plan to. We were just on the phone, and I cracked. I needed to tell someone. He's into weird spiritual crap, crystals and incense, that kind of thing. Normally, I'd roll my eyes at it all, but I was desperate. I expected him to laugh. He didn't. His face went pale. He asked me, slowly, "Did you pee? Near any kind of sign?" "What? Yeah. It said not to, but come on, man. Who makes a sign like that?" He told me about local legends, spirits that dwell in untouched places, territorial entities, not evil, just ancient and unforgiving. He gave me a name, an old woman who ran a spiritual healing shop on the outskirts of town. I didn't sleep much after that call. I kept pacing my apartment, going back and forth about whether I should actually go. But the moment I stepped out onto my balcony for air and caught that scent, damp earth, like the woods again, I knew I had to, so I went. That next morning, the place looked like something out of a folklore story. Weathered wood siding, faded wind chimes, a bell that rang without a breeze. I stood outside for a minute, questioning everything. What the hell was I doing? I didn't believe in spirits or energies or whatever else this woman peddled. I was a guy who worked spreadsheets, not someone who saged his living room. But I was out of options, so I stepped inside. She wasn't what I expected. No beads, no flowing robes or jangling necklaces. Just a plain old woman, maybe in her late 60s, wearing a cardigan and thick glasses that slipped down her nose. If I saw her at a grocery store, I'd think she was someone's grandma, not someone who dealt with curses or spirits. And yet, the way she looked at me, it was like she already knew everything I hadn't said. She didn't even flinch when I told her. In fact, she looked at me like she already knew. Her eyes, dark, steady, scanned my face, then dropped briefly to my posture. "You're carrying it," she said softly. "The weight, it's clinging to you." I blinked. "You can tell that just by looking at me." She gave a small, almost sad smile. "People who come in here with that look, they don't need to say much." Still, I hesitated. It all felt too weird, too out there. But she gestured to a back room, a small space dimly lit with candles and draped cloth. The air smelled like sage and dried flowers. I followed her in, sitting across from her at a short table. "You're not crazy," she said before I could even speak. "You were marked, not out of malice, but because you crossed a boundary, one that doesn't forgive easily." She leaned closer, examining the tired sag in my eyes, the trembling in my hands. "Let me guess, you haven't been able to sleep. Your body's rebelling against you. The woods, they're with you now." Her words, simple as they were, hit harder than I expected. They aligned too well, too exactly. That's when I started talking. Really talking, and she just listened. No judgment, no disbelief, only a quiet understanding. Then, after a long silence, she finally said, her tone slower, more deliberate this time, "You disrespected its ground," she said simply. "You must return, bring clean water, pour it where you peed, apologize, mean it." I stared at her. "What happens if I don't?" She looked at me for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she said, "It'll keep spreading, not just in your body, but around you, your home, your mind. It doesn't punish, it consumes, slowly, patiently, until you're part of it." The way she said it, it didn't sound like a threat. It sounded like a certainty. Something in my chest clenched. I nodded, slowly, not because I understood it all, but because, deep down, I believed her. There wasn't even a debate in my head. I didn't ask questions. I just knew. I had to do it. Without another word, I stood up and asked what kind of water to bring. Instead of answering right away, she raised a hand and said, "Wait." Then she got up, walked slowly over to a small fridge in the corner of the room, and pulled out a sealed glass bottle of spring water. "This one is clean, unopened, fresh." She sat back down, and without looking at me began to murmur something low and rhythmic. It wasn't English, maybe not even a real language, but it felt heavy, like the words themselves carried weight. She held the bottle between her palms, closed her eyes, and whispered to it like it could listen. Then she handed it to me. "Sprinkle it where you violated the ground, all of it, no drops left." I didn't even ask what she whispered, didn't care. I just wanted this over with. That explanation, whatever it meant, could come another day. Before I left her house, I turned back to say something. Maybe to ask what that thing in the woods really was. But the words caught in my throat. I realized I didn't want to know. Not yet. Not while I still had to look over my shoulder. It could wait for some other day maybe, so I thanked her, nodded, and left. That whole day, I couldn't sit still. I kept checking the clock, kept checking the water bottle she gave me. Part of me wanted to chicken out, just throw the thing in the trash and pretend this was all some drawn-out hallucination, but I couldn't, not with how bad it had gotten. So, that evening, just before sunset, I drove back to that road. I brought that spring water bottle. My hands were shaking the entire drive. The road looked different, quieter, heavier. I parked in the same spot. My heart thudded in my chest as I stepped out. I found the sign. It was still there, tilting, watching. I stood there for what felt like forever, clutching the water bottle, my throat dry. The woods around me were so quiet. It was like sound itself had vanished. No wind, no birds, just pressure. I unscrewed the lid and poured the water slowly, letting it soak into the earth like an offering. Then I spoke. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I didn't know. I was drunk. I disrespected your place. I shouldn't have." The wind shifted. The air felt thicker. Then a sound, not a voice, not words, just something stepping back, fading. I stayed frozen until the sun dipped below the trees. For a moment I just stood there, gripping the empty bottle, waiting for something, anything, to lunge out and grab me. But nothing came. I turned and walked back toward the car, each step feeling heavier than the last. I opened the door with shaking hands, slid into the seat, and just sat there. I didn't start the engine right away. My body felt light, like the fear had burned away all the weight inside me. My skin prickled with leftover adrenaline. But underneath it all was calm, uneasy, but real. When I finally turned the key, the engine sounded normal. The air didn't feel thick anymore. The trees no longer leaned in. As I drove back down the road, I kept glancing at the rearview mirror, not